My name is Daniel Shaw. I'm 42 years old. I live a quiet life, working as an auto mechanic in a small town in Montana. I've always been close to my mom. She's the kind of woman who raised us with her bare hands, no college degree, just grit, love, and unwavering strength. My father died when I was 15, and from that day on, I became the man of the house. My sister, Allison, is 3 years younger than me. Growing up, we were close. But as time passed, she changed. And I ignored the signs, until the night I got the call that split our family in two. It was 12:43 a.m. I still remember the exact numbers, blinking on my screen. It was Mom. When I answered, I couldn't hear her voice, just the sound of wind, heavy breathing, and distant traffic. I shouted her name, and after a pause she whispered, "Danny, I'm cold. I don't know where I am." That was it. My heart dropped into my stomach. I jumped out of bed, didn't even put socks on, just boots and a coat. Outside, a blizzard had swallowed the world. But I didn't care. I got in my truck, filled the tank, and started driving. 200 miles in thick snow, no visibility, no GPS signal. For 3 hours, I drove with white-knuckled focus, praying out loud, scanning the roads for gas stations, hoping to see her, hoping she hadn't collapsed. I finally found her outside a rundown gas station, shivering in the corner next to the ice machine, her lips blue and a bruise on her face. She couldn't speak. I wrapped her in every blanket I had and got her into the truck. She was too weak to cry, but I could feel it. Something terrible had happened. She was mumbling names in her sleep as I drove her to the ER. My sister's name, her husband's name. I sat in the hospital room as they warmed her body and treated her cracked ribs. When she finally looked me in the eye, she said the words that changed me forever. They beat me. They threw me out like I was nothing. I stood in that hospital hallway staring at the snow through the window, and something in me broke, but not in the way you might think. I didn't scream. I didn't call them. I didn't threaten revenge. I simply turned everything inside me silent. I became still, like a blade, just before it's drawn. I told the doctors to keep her under observation for a few days. I took pictures of her injuries. I asked every question I needed to without showing emotion. And then I got in my truck, drove to a nearby motel, and wrote one sentence in my notebook: "They will regret this." If you've ever had to sit in silence, knowing your own blood betrayed the woman who gave you everything, then you know what kind of storm brews in the quiet heart of a man like me. I sat in that motel room for hours, listening to the heater click and hum as the storm raged outside. My mind was calm, but not numb. It was focused, sharper than I'd ever felt. I thought back over the years, how my mother gave everything to us. She skipped meals so we could eat. She worked 2 jobs just to keep Allison and me clothed for school. And yet the daughter she had protected, the one she believed would always have her back, had become the very person who threw her into the snow like trash. That was a wound deeper than any bruise. I kept asking myself, how did we get here? Allison wasn't always cruel. She used to cry when Mom was sick. But ever since she married Greg, something shifted. He was a controlling man with an easy smile but dead eyes. At first I thought he was just proud. Then I saw how he looked at Mom, like she was an inconvenience in their house. I noticed the little digs, the dismissive tone, the way he joked about putting her in a home, and Allison. She laughed along. I thought she was just stressed. I told myself she'd grow out of it. I gave her excuses, too many. When Mom moved in with them last year, I thought maybe things had settled. Allison said it was to help her after her hip surgery. But I should have known. I should have visited more, should have stayed close. Instead, I let work get in the way. I let distance do what silence can't erode relationships without a single word. Guilt hit me like a train. But guilt wasn't enough. I wasn't going to waste time punishing myself when there were people who needed to feel the weight of what they'd done. I didn't want vengeance. I wanted justice wrapped in intelligence. I wasn't going to scream at them, show up at their door with fists raised, or post anything online. That's what they'd expect. That's the kind of mess Greg would feed on, twisting it to make me look unstable. No. I was going to make them unravel from the inside out. I just had to find the threads they were hiding behind. So, I started digging. I spent the next 2 days calling old neighbors, talking to their co-workers, and quietly piecing together the way they lived. Turns out, Greg wasn't as financially sound as he claimed. He was over-leveraged. The home they graciously let Mom stay in was actually under her name, transferred during her surgery recovery. And the car Allison drove, registered to Mom. They had positioned her as a resource, not a relative, and when she stopped being useful, they dumped her like a broken tool. It didn't take long to realize I had something powerful in my hands, not just the truth, but proof, documents, signatures, patterns of financial abuse. What they thought was buried beneath paperwork was actually a loaded weapon, and I was calm enough to learn how to aim it. That's when I understood. Silence is not weakness. It's strategy in its purest form. I drove back home with my mother's discharge papers in the glove box and a USB drive filled with everything I'd gathered, every receipt, every bank transfer, every signature they thought no one would ever question. I didn't speak to them. I didn't return Allison's one vague text asking if Mom had ended up with me. That silence. It was louder than any accusation I could have thrown. Because people like them, they feed off chaos, but they panic when you give them nothing. I spent the next week compiling a report. Organized, detailed, professional. I contacted a friend of mine, a retired attorney named Malcolm, who owed me a favor from years back. He took one look at what I'd found and said, "Dan, they're done. This is elder abuse, financial fraud, property theft. We can press civil charges, maybe even criminal." But I shook my head. I didn't want to go the courtroom route. Not yet. I wanted something more subtle. Something that would leave them exposed before the world without me ever stepping into the light. Greg worked at a private mortgage firm, the kind that flaunts family values and moral reputation. I knew one scandal, one whiff of unethical behavior would shake that world, so I crafted an anonymous envelope. Inside, copies of documents, time-stamped photos of my mother's bruises, and a statement of concern from a concerned community member. I mailed it directly to his HR department. I didn't include my name, didn't have to. Then I turned my attention to Allison. She worked part-time at a boutique that prided itself on supporting women's empowerment and community care. I composed another packet, screenshots of messages, evidence of my mom's caretaking account being drained, and a brief description of the night she was thrown out. I sent it to the owner of the boutique, the local newspaper, and the church where Allison loved to be seen handing out cookies after service. I didn't need to tell them what to do. The truth, when properly framed, speaks louder than outrage. And then I waited. The calls didn't come. But the silence from them was different now. It was strained, tense. My aunt called to say Allison had stopped attending Sunday brunch. Greg's name disappeared from his firm's website. A mutual friend told me Allison had deleted all her social media accounts overnight. I didn't celebrate. I just took my mom out for coffee. I watched her laugh with the barista as if she'd forgotten the storm she'd been thrown into. That, to me, was the first real win. But I wasn't done yet. There was one last thread I needed to pull. The house. The one they tried to claim. It still legally belonged to Mom. They thought she wouldn't notice the subtle signature switch buried in recovery paperwork, but I noticed, and I had it reversed. Quietly, legally, flawlessly. And with that, the ground beneath them began to crack. By the third week, I started to see the unraveling in real time. Greg's firm issued a bland public statement about internal restructuring, but I knew what that meant. He was quietly let go to avoid scandal. A man like him, built on appearances and arrogance, was suddenly unemployed, with no severance and no fallback. He tried to play the victim, of course, told a few people that someone was out to get them. But when your life is held together by lies, even whispers of truth can make the whole thing crumble. Alison, on the other hand, went quieter. She called my mom's phone twice, blocked number. No voicemail. She didn't call me. She knew better. I don't think she understood yet how much I had learned, how deep I'd gone, or how deliberate my silence truly was. But she felt the shift. That much was obvious. The boutique let her go under the guise of staff changes, but I heard from someone on the board that the owner cried when she read the packet, said how could anyone treat their mother like that. I didn't reply to the texts my aunt sent, urging me to forgive, to remember we're family. I wasn't holding a grudge. I was simply enforcing a boundary they never thought I'd draw. And it wasn't for me, it was for Mom. For all the nights she sat alone in that house, enduring insults wrapped in fake smiles. For all the time she tried to love them through their cruelty. That season was over. One afternoon, I got a formal letter from Greg. It was laughable, an attempt to demand compensation for slander and defamation. No lawyer's name, just a printed template filled with puffed-up legal language and empty threats. I filed it neatly into a folder titled Desperation. I didn't even flinch. He was trying to regain control, but that ship had sunk long ago. He'd been stripped of his armor, and now he was swinging at ghosts. Then came the house. I had worked with Malcolm to ensure the title was transferred back to Mom quietly, but legally. Greg and Alison had been living in it under the assumption that she'd never come back for it. So when the eviction notice arrived, delivered by a uniformed officer on a quiet Tuesday morning, it was a cold splash of reality. They had 30 days to vacate. No loopholes, no appeals. I wasn't taking the home out of spite. I was reclaiming it. My mother and I sat on the porch of my house that evening, sipping tea under the stars. She looked stronger, somehow, more at peace. She didn't ask about Alison. She didn't need to. She just said, "You were always quiet, Danny." But I see now that silence can be louder than shouting. I smiled. Because that was the moment I knew the real storm had passed. It was late spring when the full collapse began to show itself. Greg's name started coming up in conversations around town. But not the way it used to. No more bragging about real estate or networking with the Chamber of Commerce. Now, it was murmurs at the diner about a man who lost everything, who was spotted arguing outside the unemployment office, who blamed jealous family for his downfall. But I said nothing. That's the beauty of calculated silence. It lets others do the storytelling for you. As for Alison, she had moved into a small rental across town. I heard it was a downgrade, drastically so. No more two-car garage, no more backyard parties. I passed her once in the grocery store parking lot. She saw me, her lips parted like she might speak, but I just gave her a neutral nod and walked past. No words, no revenge speech, just the weight of consequence hanging in the air between us. She looked thinner, drained. Regret has a way of aging you, especially when it's earned. One day, I received a handwritten letter in the mail. The handwriting was unmistakably hers. No return address. It started with "I don't expect you to forgive me," and ended with a weak attempt to explain, to justify, to mourn what she had lost. But nowhere in the letter did she ask about Mom. That said more than anything. She missed the house, the status, the comfort, but not the woman she hurt to get it. I read it once, folded it, and placed it in the drawer. Some things are better kept as reminders. Greg, in a final act of desperation, filed a claim saying my mother had manipulated them into the house situation. It didn't go far. The paper trail, the medical records, the financial transfers, all said otherwise. His claims were dismissed without even a hearing. That was the end of it. No courtroom scene. Just a slow fade into irrelevance. The man who once strutted through town now avoided eye contact with strangers. I never celebrated any of it. This wasn't about joy. It was about restoring what was right. In a world where good people often get trampled by those with louder mouths and sharper teeth. My revenge wasn't about destroying them. It was about removing their power, and in that I succeeded fully, without shouting, without violence, without a single angry word. I took my mother back to her rightful home. The following weekend, she stood in the doorway looking around with wide eyes, as if seeing it for the first time. The rooms had been emptied, but not cleaned. She didn't mind. "It feels lighter in here," she whispered, and I knew exactly what she meant. The house sat still. That first night, almost too still. I could feel the absence of their energy, their entitlement, their cruelty, like poison finally bled out of a wound. Mom walked barefoot across the hardwood floors, touching the walls like she was remembering what love felt like. I left her alone in the living room with a warm cup of tea and the space to breathe. After everything she'd endured, she needed silence, but not the kind they forced on her, the kind that healed. I spent the next few weeks slowly repairing what was left of the place. I fixed the cracked banister, replaced the moldy carpet in the guest room, and scrubbed away every fingerprint they left behind. It was part restoration, part therapy. Not just for her, but for me. Every bolt I tightened felt like reclaiming something sacred. Not just the house, but the legacy of a woman who deserved so much more than what her daughter gave her. Mum never asked for updates about them. She didn't want to know, and I didn't offer. She was more interested in the tulips, blooming in the front yard, the way the light hit the kitchen window again, the feeling of safety returning to her bones. Sometimes justice isn't loud. It's a soft sigh at the end of a long war, a chair that doesn't creak with tension, a lock on a door you finally trust again. As for me, I stopped checking for news about Greg or Allison. I had learned that closure isn't about watching people suffer. It's about no longer caring whether they do. I wasn't there to punish them. I was there to protect the one person who always protected me. That was enough. Revenge isn't satisfying when it's bitter, but it is profoundly sweet when it's quiet, clean, and complete. One afternoon, I found an old photo in Mom's drawer. Us three at a lake, me with a fishing pole. Allison holding a sandwich she'd made for Mom. We looked happy. Maybe we were. But time changes people. Choices change people more. And while I will never understand how someone can turn so cold to the hands that raised them, I do understand this. You can choose to break the cycle, or you can choose to become it. I chose to break it, and that decision, above all else, was the revenge that mattered most. The few months passed. Summer rolled in with long evenings and a slower rhythm. Mom had started volunteering at the library again, organizing books and telling stories to children like nothing had happened. Her spirit was remarkable, not because she wasn't broken, but because she had chosen not to stay broken. She found joy again in small things: peach tea, crossword puzzles, the hum of a radio on Sunday mornings. It was like watching someone rebuild themselves one peaceful hour at a time. I still hadn't spoken a word to Allison. She hadn't tried again after the letter, and that silence, our silence, became permanent. Not hostile, not unresolved, just done. Some relationships are graves with flowers on top. They look beautiful from a distance, but you can't live in them. I didn't hate her. I just didn't recognize her anymore. And that was enough of a goodbye. Greg faded into obscurity. Someone told me he moved to another town, started working under a different name. Rumors said he was trying to rebuild his image. But some stains don't wash out, especially the kind you inflict on others. I never pursued him. Never needed to. Men like him die slowly, suffocated by the very image they once protected. Let him have his mirrors. There was one day, though, a day that felt like a full circle moment. I walked by the house they once shared. It was up for sale, empty, forgotten. A for sale sign swung crookedly in the breeze. The grass was tall, uncut. The porch paint had chipped. All the pride they built had rotted from the inside out. And as I stood there, I didn't feel anger or pride. I felt gratitude, because the past had officially let go of me. Mum joined me later that evening on the porch swing of our home. She reached over and squeezed my hand. "I don't know what I did to deserve a son like you," she whispered. I looked at her, this woman who had been discarded like garbage and still had love left in her, and I said, "You taught me everything I needed to become him." And that was the real ending. Not their fall, but our peace. Life began to settle after that. Not back to how it was, but into something better, stronger, more honest. I opened my own auto shop a month later, naming it after my father, Reed and Son Repairs. Mom designed the sign herself. We hung it together, two survivors, two builders, standing beneath the weight of a new beginning. Business grew slowly, but with integrity. I didn't want shortcuts. I'd seen what those cost. People came to trust me not just for the work I did, but for the way I treated them. That mattered to me more than anything, because after everything, what I learned most is this: when someone shows you what they're capable of behind closed doors, believe them, and never become them, no matter how easy it is. I found healing in hard work, in honest labor, in quiet mornings with coffee and the smell of oil and metal. I didn't need therapy. I had socket wrenches and time. Every vehicle I fixed reminded me that broken things can work again if someone's willing to care enough to put in the effort. That's what Mom taught me too. She was the blueprint for recovery, graceful, stubborn, and kind. I kept a small journal at the shop. In it, I wrote down things I'd never say out loud. Things like, "Pain is real, but so is healing," or "You can forgive people without opening the door again." Those were the quiet rules I lived by now. Rules forged from fire, and they served me well. The town never asked questions, but they knew. You can tell when a man has been through something. It shows in his eyes, in how he speaks. Slow, thoughtful, never needing to be loud. That's who I became. Not out of revenge, out of restoration. Because what they tried to take from me wasn't power. It was peace, and I made sure I got it back, piece by piece. This story doesn't end with rage. It ends with repair. Mom, I got older, of course. Time doesn't stop, even when pain feels like it should freeze everything. But she grew older with grace. No bitterness, just gratitude. Every birthday she told me the same thing. "Thank you for coming that night. I think if you hadn't, I might have just let go." And every time I'd say, "You didn't call me to be saved. You called me to finish the fight." That call was the last thing she ever had to do alone. When she passed, I buried her with the photo we took at the lake. I told the mortician to put it in her right hand, folded, not framed. She didn't need perfection. She needed something real. The funeral was quiet. No show. No grand speeches. Just people who remembered her smile, her warmth, her strength. Allison didn't come. I don't think she dared. And honestly, it would have felt wrong if she had. After the service, I stood at her grave and whispered a single promise. Your story didn't end in that snowstorm. It ended here, in peace, on your terms. I left a tulip at her headstone and drove back to the shop. I didn't cry until I turned the lights off that night. And when I did, it wasn't because I was broken. It was because I was whole. Years passed, and I kept building. The shop expanded. I hired veterans, kids fresh out of high school, men trying to turn their lives around. I gave them what Mom gave me, a chance. I never preached. I just listened. Because sometimes that's all anyone really needs, to be heard in a world that keeps trying to silence them. People asked me once if I ever regretted what I did, if I wished I'd handled things differently. My answer is always the same. No, because I didn't destroy anyone. I just stopped covering for them. I let the truth rise to the surface and trusted it would speak for itself, and it did. And the truth is, my silence didn't just protect Mom, it protected who I became. I still get the occasional look in town, the subtle glance, the quiet recognition. Some folks know pieces of the story. Others just know there was once a man who burned quietly and came out the other side cleaner, not colder. I let them wonder. Let them write their own versions of what happened. Because silence, after all, is also a kind of storytelling. The house became a home again. I visit it every Sunday, even though I live elsewhere now. I keep the porch swing in working condition. I water the tulips. I sit on the steps and listen to the wind. Sometimes I swear I can still hear her humming from the kitchen. Not a ghost, just a memory that refuses to fade. And I don't want it to. Allison never reached out again. Maybe she's embarrassed. Maybe she's ashamed. Maybe she thinks I hate her. The truth is, I don't think about her much at all. She made her choices. I made mine. And in the end, mine led to something beautiful. Hers? Well, I'll let time decide what her story becomes. Greg's name never comes up anymore. He disappeared like smoke. I heard he works under a different name in a different town. Let him run. You can't outrun the mirror. And men like him, they never stop looking over their shoulder. That's its own punishment. As for me, I've found peace, not in forgetting, but in remembering rightly. In knowing that I didn't just survive betrayal, I outlived it, outbuilt it, and outgrew it. That's the real story. Not what they did, but what I became because of it. Let them wonder how I stayed so calm. Let them wonder how I made it through without breaking. That mystery, it's the final chapter they'll never get to read.